to another episode of Robe Guy Answers Your Question about life, love, and surrender. We are going to be talking today about fear of intimacy and lack of intimacy and how to overcome that. This is actually a very perfectly synchronistic question from Gigi. Not really a question or a statement, just a little bit of a thing. One of my interesting things that happens a lot is that people will say, I have a question, and they don't have a question. They'll just share their feelings with me, and I'll ask them what the question is. This is a really good one because Gigi doesn't say, I have a question. She says, you should do a segment on how to overcome and surrender to the fears of intimacy or lack of intimacy due to not overcoming your fears of rejection. Now, that's an interesting question. It has a lot of stuff to it, and in this video we're going to be talking a lot deeper about it. But the fear of intimacy, or any fears of intimacy, to be honest, are not unfounded. That's the first thing that's worth recognizing. People often have a fear of intimacy when they've been hurt in the past, or maybe hurt, but also not necessarily around intimacy, if that makes sense. Because sometimes we have a fear of intimacy when we've been hurt in another way, and our body sort of is reminded of intimacy in that sense, if that makes sense. So for example, a fear of intimacy doesn't always have to come from a painful sexual experience, but a fear of intimacy can come from being vulnerable. Now, I'm using the word intimacy to mean sexual in this case, but it doesn't always have to be the case. Because sometimes fear of intimacy can mean like, hey, I'm just not afraid to share my soul with you because I've been hurt in the past. And it doesn't even have to be of relationships. So if you yourself are going through a fear of intimacy, well, what do we do? Gigi asks, how to overcome and surrender to the fears of intimacy. Well, what do fears of intimacy feel like? Surrender is that. It's letting yourself fully feel those things. Personally, what ends up happening is you end up moving beyond it. That's literally when I'm working with people one-on-one. And if you haven't booked your call right now, everyone gets one free call. What happens beyond that, I don't fucking know yet. But the fear of intimacy within ourself can come from a number of places. And usually we aren't fully aware of where it has come from until we have processed it, till we have deeply surrendered and processed that fear. Now, the next thing that is really interesting about this is the fear of lack of intimacy. The fear of lack of intimacy. Again, obviously the answer will be, have you ever tried... Where's the mic? Have you ever tried surrender? But the fear of lack of intimacy is, again, a perfectly valid fear. It's, to be honest, it's going to be different things for different people. But I would describe very generally that the fear of lack of intimacy can come from the fear of being alone. And well, what happens when we're alone? Well, if there's a fear of being alone, there's a fear of the feelings that come from being alone. So I would say that if you are in the amazing position where you are both afraid of lack of intimacy and currently experiencing a lack of intimacy, well, that actually works out in your favor, because now you actually get to surrender to those feelings. You get to process those feelings in that space. And the interesting thing here is, well, you almost will, as consequence, develop what I would refer to as relationship superpowers. If you do not have a fear of lack, you have nothing to lose. If there is nothing to lose, you have everything to give. And if you have everything to give, and someone meets someone as amazing as you in that position, well, Jesus Christ, they're going to fucking hang around, aren't they? So it's almost a fulfilling prophecy. And it always will be a self-fulfilling prophecy, that the fear of lack of intimacy, or the lack of a relationship, or the lack of love, or the lack of sex, or whatever, is almost, to the fucking point, the very thing that pushes it away. We are afraid, so we hold on, and the person feels that we hold on, they hold on. So unless they can handle it, they will essentially, and for all intents and purposes, subtly and unconsciously push us away, because they can feel that our happiness is reliant on them. And they know that while they might want to be responsible for our happiness, or at least a part of it, they know that deep down it's not theirs, that it's your happiness. So if you have a fear of lack of intimacy, to be honest, just not having intimacy is enough to trigger that feeling, and then you surrender. If you can surrender at least once, if you can remember to surrender, you therefore start the process. You start the process of healing. You start the process of feeling. You start the process to unpack. Maybe it's not the fear of lack of intimacy that really scares you. Maybe it's the everything else. It's not feeling loved. It's not feeling wanted. And then you surrender to those feelings. What does that give you? Well, it might be that you were afraid of being hurt. And then you surrender to that fear of being hurt. Then you realize that you were just hurt once as a kid. And you never let it go. But now as an adult, it doesn't really matter anymore. So you heal that. You let it go. You move beyond it. You surrender and you heal and you grow. And suddenly there's energy release and you feel lighter. Which is my honest to God definition of enlightenment. Not a destination, but a journey. The process of feeling lighter. Also a destination, but that's for later on. Now, Gigi then says, the fears of lack of intimacy due to not overcoming your fears of rejection. That's it in a nutshell. Now, here's the thing that I really want to get across. If you are currently in a position where you are looking at your fear of rejection, you are fucking blessed. Fucking blessed. Why? Because not everyone has to deal with that. It's not in everybody's life path to surrender, to process their fear of rejection. Not everyone has to do it. There are the lucky ones, or in my words, the unlucky ones, who, for all intents and purposes, can go on their entire life and not have to worry about it. There are the unlucky ones, who go through their entire life and in some way accidentally surrendered to that fear without even realizing it, so they're not conscious about it, just like we are now. So, the fear, or the fears of rejection, as you surrender to that, as you process it, as you heal it, as you love it, as you look at your fears of rejection, you will become braver. You will become more fearless. There will not be, or for some people there might be. When I jump on a call with someone and they have something like this, and it's like they're suddenly just a hell of a lot fearless, I'm blown away. I'm like, are you sure? But for most people, it'll be a sliding scale, where as you process the fear of rejection, you become braver. You start putting yourself in new situations. You start sharing yourself more. And you start to bring up new fears of rejection. But then you surrender, you heal, you grow, you learn, you love, you move beyond. So what ends up happening? Well, then you become braver. And then you expose yourself to more situations. So it just is this perpetuated cycle of healing and growth. But the best way to heal this shit is obviously to surrender, but to be exposed to it. Because more often than not, we're afraid of rejection. So what do? We alter our lives, we alter our behavior so we don't have to experience it. But remember the rule. It's not that you did X. It's sometimes that you didn't do X enough. It's not that you were afraid. It's that you weren't afraid enough. It's not that you had a fear. It's that you didn't have a fear enough. You didn't get the opportunity to process it. But that's life. Life is beautiful like this. Life is amazing like this. Life, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, will lead you to experience the shit you need to experience for most people, especially if you're someone who's walking a path of surrender. To go through and witness and feel the very things you need to feel, to heal the very things you need to heal, to become the very person you want to become, and have the fucking relationships, the love, the sex, the intimacy, the passion, the career, the health, the looks, the appearance that you wanted to have. But these blessings come in disguises. That we are afraid of love, or afraid of rejection, so we never fully love, or afraid of intimacy, so we never fully are vulnerable. Now, intimacy is a varied word. I often use intimacy to describe sex. I know Gigi, sometimes Gigi might be referring to sharing of oneself. I know, for example, she might not even be talking about herself, although she might be. The journey is the destination. Love will come. Love does come. Love comes when you make space for it. But it's in here, in your robe. It's in here, in your fucking heart. As you heal that shit, you gain awareness. The fog on your eyes opens up and you start to see shit that you've never seen before. Because you're the you that you always wanted to be. The irony is, here's the self-fulfilling prophecy about the fear of intimacy. Let's take it intimacy to mean just sharing your feelings. Well, what happens when we're afraid? We don't share. And it builds up, 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 it builds up. And then we're with that person we want, and we fucking share everything, and it is an avalanche. It is a flood, and if they are not the person that can handle it, what ends up happening? They are overwhelmed. They back the fuck off. Then we start to think it's us. Then we start to think that maybe the problem was that we were intimate. On the other hand, lack of fear of intimacy. Lack of fear of intimacy. You have no qualms with intimacy, and you have no qualms with no intimacy. So you're with that person. Honey, I think you're great. Fuck, you're gorgeous. I really like spending my time with you. And all the entire time, you actually share your feelings more and more and more. You both become climatized to it. And it is normal because you feel comfortable, they feel comfortable. And then you share the big L word. I love you. Maybe they were ready for it, maybe they weren't, but it doesn't matter. They are not running away because it does not have that gravitas that someone who is afraid would give it. I love you, I need you to love me back. Because when you finally said, I love you, without a fear, it's a big deal, but it's also simultaneously not. Because you were saying, I love you the entire time, through every thought, through every word, through every deed. So processing the fear of intimacy is a blessing you can give to yourself. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like this video, you can support the channel in many ways. You can support me in many ways. Like, comment, subscribe, all that crap. If you do want any more work, or if you want to work with me, you can book your free call if you haven't already. In the description. I'm currently working on a program for people who've worked with me in the past, something more accessible, so keep an eye out for that. And I also have online courses available. My latest one is about accessing deep suppressed desires. I'll talk to you soon.